Please welcome this evening's guest moderator from the Film Society of Lincoln Center, Eugene Hernandez, and tonight's guest, Steve McQueen.
Thank you for being here. Welcome, Steve McQueen. The film 12 Years a Slave is playing at the New York Film Festival tomorrow night and again on Sunday. I've had the privilege of seeing the film a few weeks ago at the Telluride Film Festival, and then again this morning at the New York Film Festival at a press screening. And Steve, you said in Telluride that before you found the book 12 Years a Slave, and we'll talk more about the book and the story in a moment, but you said that before you found the book, you had decided that you wanted to make a movie or write a screenplay, make a movie about American slavery. When did that light bulb go off in your head? When did you make that sort of decision, and why did you make that decision? Why did you want to tell that story?
Well, it's more about slavery, really, in general. It happened to become an American story through the book I found. And the reason why I wanted to sort of make a movie about slavery was just because it was someone asked me a question recently. It was a strange question. It was a question that I've never been asked before. When was it the first time you heard about slavery? I can't remember as a child. I couldn't remember, but all I remember was a huge sense of shame. A huge sense of, embarrassment, really. And I wanted to sort of overcome that. I wanted to conquer it. I wanted to tame it. I wanted to master it. I wanted to understand it. And it was one of these things where, in the history of cinema, there was a massive hole regarding this huge world, not just American, subject, huge. And I wanted to investigate it. And that was my want.
Have you ever wondered why, or have you ever been able to figure out why there's been such a hole? I mean, certainly the topic has been explored even recently in Tarantino's film last year. But you're absolutely right when you explain that it certainly hasn't been explored in any in-depth way for years.
I think in America people were pretty embarrassed by the whole thing. I wanted to avoid it. I think it was okay looking at sort of Germans or Nazis in Germany as far as Holocaust is concerned, because it was something which was removed. And in one's own backyard, I think it's difficult and understandable, really, difficult to deal with and to contemplate and to comprehend. But now I think people are actually open to wanting to deal with this subject matter. I mean, with the unfortunate events of Trayvon Martin, with having a black president, the 150th anniversary of the abolition of slavery, 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, the voting rights being taken back as such. I mean, it's a perfect storm right now, and I think people are asking themselves, who are they and what are they within the context of now? And how did it come to this as such? Looking backwards, you need to look, in order to go forwards, one has to look backwards. I think people are very much sort of want to engage in this particular subject right now. I'm very pleased, of course.
Can you elaborate for me as I try to, I want to get to a little bit more about your own personal reason for wanting to explore this, and I'm curious to know, in your background, your upbringing, your schooling, how the subject was treated, whether that's American slavery or slavery in general, how it was explored for you in your upbringing. And you mentioned feeling this sense of...
It wasn't at all.
It wasn't at all?
No, it wasn't at all. I mean, there was a very brief history lesson, if anything, a day, that was it, we're off. Let's do the Second World War, It was more like that for me in Europe. And again, I think the psychological impact of slavery, I mean, we see it, walk out the street, you see it. I mean, the mental health, unemployment, prisons. I mean, it's quite evident. One doesn't have to travel far to sort of see the evidence of slavery. And it's one of those things which obviously needs to be talked about and examined. I mean, it's quite obvious, unfortunately.
You live in Amsterdam, and you said something to the effect of when you found this book, and I wanted to have you explain how and when you found this book in a moment. But when you found this book, you couldn't help but reflect on the Diary of Anne Frank. tell me about your wife finding this book and
Yeah.
handing it to you and that experience.
Well, I had the idea, I needed an in onto the subject matter of slavery, and my in was that I had this idea of a free man who gets kidnapped into slavery. And I was working with John Ridley on the script, and it was a bit stagnant. And I was talking to my wife, and she said to me, "Well, why don't you look into the real accounts of slavery?" Obviously. And then we both did some research, and then she found this book, 12 Years a Slave. And she said, "I think I got it." And if anything, that was obviously a huge understatement, because when I had it in my hand and I was reading the book and turning every page became this kind of revelation.
How long ago was that? How long ago was it that she found it?
2011, possibly. I always acquainted with my son, so yeah. How old's Dexter? He's 4, so yeah, okay, 2009. Sorry. Sorry. That's good. So we found the book, and I was very upset with myself, really. Very upset with myself. So how come I didn't know about this book? How did I not know this book? And then I realized no one I knew about this book. And what was interesting about it was 97 years before, Anne Frank's diary, there was this guy called Solomon Northup who wrote this book about slavery, a first-hand account, obviously. And it was just upset with myself. But then, that was it. I had the idea came into 3 dimensions in my hand, and that was the script. There it was. And I thought, okay, let's go for it.
As you see in the trailer, and as we've alluded to, but just to be more specific, the film is the story of a man, a northern man, who is kidnapped into slavery, and it's a harrowing. The concept is not only harrowing, but what we witness in this film that he endures is beyond terrifying. Tell me about, as you read that book then and learned about his story, tell me about some of the early steps you took and the early decisions you made as to how you would adapt it. I haven't read it, so I'm wondering about the different directions you could have gone.
The main thing, I just want to obliterate a little bit of your question through this one word. It's called love. It's a very odd, interesting, wonderful, challenging, confrontational, upsetting word, because that's the thing what I discovered through reading the book, in a way, that this person and had survived through his love for his family and a certain kind of, how can I say, strength, as it were. And I can't think of, again, with the book, it was a process. It was a process of reading. Again, I think 80% of the dialogue comes from the book because it's so good. It is what it is. I mean, you play with it within form, structure, and of course add scenes and so forth. But it was the 80% of the dialogue of this picture is from the book, because it was so good. It's about structure for me more than anything. Sorry. Hope that answers the question.
You said something today you said something today about that I hadn't heard. A way you described the film in a way I hadn't heard, but the more I thought about it after, and since heading over here this afternoon, you called the movie science fiction.
Yes.
Maybe you could elaborate on.
Well, when I first, again, it reminded me of Pinocchio. It's in a movie. Obviously, you haven't seen it yet. There's 2 men called Hamilton and Brown, who actually lure Solomon to play in the circus. So it was Pinocchio, and then at the same time, it reminded me of the Brothers Grimm. Very dark, sort of it's a fairy tale. It's like Hansel and Gretel. You sort of start out, in a happy place. You go through the most darkest place you could think of, and come out again, back home. You wake up. It's like a nightmare, but you dip your toe in something, you come out. So that was interesting to me, because that traditional, go back to structure a little bit, that traditional storytelling structure was there already into the piece itself. So it was there. It was for me. This whole film was like a fairy tale. Science fiction was the whole idea. When I was thinking of science fiction, the analogy I was thinking about was that if you came down from Earth, if you came down from space onto Earth, there's this book called the Bible, and it's been interpreted in certain ways by 3 different people in a very different way. These people who are slaves, people who aren't slaves. It's a kind of it's so surreal what happened in our recent past that it goes beyond belief. But yeah, it's actually happened. I mean, the reason why I'm sitting here is because people survived. Some of my ancestors survived. That's the reason why I'm sitting here. And they weren't Bruce Willis with a AK-47 and a grenade. Unfortunately, they had to sort of deal with it the way they had to deal with it. And no disrespect to Bruce Willis, who's brilliant.
This movie is certainly about this one man's survival, and then that survival, or the intended survival of the people around him over this dozen years. I want to switch topics a slight bit to talk a bit about your own work as a filmmaker and how this you've continued to push the boundaries of I think how, at least it seems to me as a viewer of your films, you seem to be pushing the boundaries for yourself of what cinema is to you. If you look at your short film work, that if people have seen it, they might have seen it in a gallery setting, and then into your feature work, which perhaps feels a little more interior in Hunger, and now we, as we move through Shame, and now to this film, I see you at least pushing yourself and your own personal definition of what cinema is. At least it's expressed differently here than I've ever seen you before. So I want to ask you a very basic question, which is how you, as a creative person, define cinema, and how your own definition of cinema has changed over the past 10 years or so.
So I would label cinema. I mean, again, I think it's just art. I mean, again, I don't want to confine it to images, moving images, or it's music. It's all kinds of. I mean, again, what I say to myself is, for me, it's just a case of, we're all going to die. Might as well just go for it. I mean, literally. I mean, I mean it with no joke. We're going to die, so you just might as well just go for it, and risk and try and experiment and fail better. All of these things. I mean, I don't mind making myself into a fool. I'm way not cool, and I'm happy because I'm just trying to sort of make shit happen, whatever it is. I mean, I might have have egg on my face, but through experimenting, through challenging, you somehow think it could get through. Something can actually happen, which you never thought would happen before. So it's all about taking risk in a way, but not for risk's sake, but for the art's sake, because that's what art is. It's about experimenting, trying, failing better. That's about it. You always fail because you always come up with a question, and you always try to answer the question with the next thing, which actually becomes another question. So that's what it is for me. Conversation.
And you felt it. You felt a sense of risk in telling this story, a creative risk, personal risk. Did it feel? In what ways did it feel challenging for you?
I think making a film about slavery, for one. I mean,
the subject matter. I
mean, the subject matter, the way we shot.
Tell us about that.
Again, it's one of those things where you're trying to get to something. You're trying to sort of get to a sense of a feel. I mean, again, with the actors, it's kind of, you want the actors to be almost become, it's all about, for me, about rehearsal. Rehearsal is where it actually happens. It's like training for the Olympics, for 4 years, and then the gun goes off, and then you've got to perform. The camera's rolling. What I mean by that is that within rehearsal, you're trying to get to a situation where the characters really, the actors, know the characters. So when they come on set, no matter what they do, it's never a mistake. They become, I said this before, they become spheres. So however they move is correct. They're perfect. That's what you want to get at. That's what you're trying for. That's what you're striving for. That's it. As far as actors are concerned, we could go on and on and on and on about other camera and so forth. I've been working with Sean Bobbitt for 13 years, the cameraman. So me and Sean are pretty close. He's a Texan living in England forever. And it's just a case of, again, I love Sean because he's like a Tai Chi cameraman. If the camera's on the tripod, if the wind blows the camera this way, okay, well, let's go with this. Let's see what happens here. Again, it's allowing, what is it? It's about embracing, really embracing the environment, making it yours, being comfortable in this situation. Because often you write the script and you go to location, everything's different to how you thought it would be. You just embrace it. You make it yours. That's all.
In the film, you're painting a portrait of a particular moment in time in the American South. You do that through sometimes extended widescreen images of landscape, sunsets, sunrises, so the color of the sky, the trees, and you're mixing that at times with slave songs, songs of this period sung by slaves. I'm wondering about the portrait that you're trying to paint of the American South at this particular time.
Before I forget, because it's pioneering, it's epic. I think, of course, the American landscape, I mean, me from Europe, it's like you come here, it's everything so bloody big. It's pioneering. Even with song, with the spirituals, it's pioneering. You hear music now, you know where it comes from. I mean, we did a lot of research. With Alan Lomax, slave songs. There was an island off the United States, someone will know, where people were still singing those songs. They recorded there, and it's just amazing. So this kind of pioneering as within vocals. The sound design is pretty amazing. I'll talk to you about that later. And of course, the visuals. We had to have this wide berth, this girth of image, because it was all about that landscape. The breadth is so huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Alan Lomax being the
guy that stole those songs. Yes,
he basically went out and found these songs and then
he was paid. He was paid by the
government. Credited in your credits.
He owns all those songs.
He does own them.
Yeah,
that's incredible. I want to take a look at we have a clip.
Thank you, by the way, for letting me use them, Mr. Lomax.
Let's take a look at a clip from 12 Years a Slave, and we'll talk more, and we'll take your questions. Just as a quick aside, what can you tell us about the language that we hear spoken, the way that people speak to each other at this time period? There's a politeness that's at play, even though down below the surface there's horrific things going on. But the language has a very specific kind of, and I thought about it a lot today as I was listening to the film again. What can you tell us about the language of the period and the dialogue of the period? You said that much of it comes from the book itself.
Well, it reminds me, it's very, very British in a way,
Yeah,
it's like saying hello, but at the same time it's saying fuck you. There's a real kind of, undercurrent, undertone, it's polite, it is, there's a certain kind of etiquette. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I quite like that. Yeah.
In this scene, you see Solomon, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor. Perhaps you could tell us about why he was right for this role.
Well, Chiwetel, he reminds me of Sidney Poitier or Harry Belafonte. There was a certain kind of class and a certain kind of genteelness about him, which I wanted for that character. He has he's a certain kind of stature, which it's just when you're in a room with him, you feel there's an extreme confidence and a real kind of humanity actually about him, which obviously I needed to have through the duration of the film. They could hold on to that, this kind of dignity, which I wanted.
Was it hard to find your Solomon? Was it hard to find that actor, or did it happen?
No, I knew it was him from. Yeah, so it had to be him.
Really?
Couldn't be anyone else. No.
The film is produced by a company, or one of the production companies involved is Plan B, which is a company that in part is run by Brad Pitt, one of your producers on the film, and he has a role in the film as well. A film like this, no doubt, gains a tremendous amount of momentum the moment you have a name like Brad Pitt, either on screen or behind camera. Tell us about his involvement and his own company's involvement, Dee Dee Gardner, Jeremy Kleiner. How did they get involved? How did you intersect with Brad Pitt?
They were kind of fundamental. I think, they chased me after Hunger and wanted to work with me. And that was pretty early. And they wanted to say, what did you want to make? And that's when I told them about the idea of the project about slavery. And they were very, on wanting to work with me. And that was great. And I met Brad when he was shooting World War Z in London. And I used to hang out for him for a long chat and a nice drink. After my 15 minutes of being starstruck, of course, there was another 3 hours of just chatting about the process and what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And he was down. He was down for it. It was pretty amazing.
Might be a naive question, but I have to wonder what surprised you, if anything, about working so closely within, or at least in part within the Hollywood system, working with an actor who's so well known, a company that makes films in Hollywood, at the very least geographically. It seems very far from from a movie like Shame or a movie like Hunger that are made so far outside of that system. Maybe the difference isn't that pronounced, but I'm curious about it.
I didn't really care, I didn't really care. I knew what film I wanted to make, and I was going to make it. I mean, I had Final Cut. There was no changes in what I wanted to do. I did exactly what I wanted to do. So, I don't know how I'm ending. How apparently people are shocked and how you do that. I don't know, but I think you do it by just fucking doing it and stop talking about it. Really, everyone talks themselves out of shit. Just fucking do it. It's that easy, really.
Steve McQueen is celebrating his 44th birthday in 2 days.
What are you telling people that for?
It's on Wikipedia. It's right there.
Oh, no. Oh. Damn. Okay.
Sorry.
No, not at all.
I want to take some questions from the audience, and I might throw in a couple more as well. But there's a big crowd here, and for those listening in, we have a podcast that folks will be able to listen to, but we have a big crowd here at the Apple Store in Soho.
Thank you. I have a question concerning the score of 12 Years a Slave, which seemed to be very similar to Shame, although there are different composers, Hans Zimmer with this one and the other one. So was this intentional, or?
No, not at all. I don't hear the difference. I hear the difference. I don't hear the similarities. No. I don't say about that. I disagree, but interesting. Yeah. I mean, I tell you how it was interesting about working with Hans. Was that Hans Zimmer did a score? Was that we had this first, we had a 5-hour conversation in his studio, then another one, and then another one. It was 15 hours of chat. And then 2 other 3-hour fucking, excuse my language, 3 conversations on the phone. And then I went to his studio, and he went, ding. I was, oh man, that was amazing, this one note. And it was a process of him talking about the film. He's very interesting in some ways. It's always about what is the film about, how do we do, the intent, whatever. He's talking. And through the talk came the melody, came the actual song. It was pretty amazing. He's a great. He saved my life, I think, in a way, because he has these musicians, of course, these artists in his studio, and they're all there. They're just walking around, and it's wonderful. Yeah, moving on. Sorry.
I had wanted to go. I'm going to throw another question out before we go to the other side, because I had wanted to go backwards at one point.
Go on.
Do you remember when it was that you decided you wanted to make film?
Yeah, I had this girlfriend, and for me, going to the movies was all about sort of girls and hanging out. And you never went to movies on your own, where I come from. Otherwise, you'd be sad. What are you doing on your own in a movie theater? And she was a person who introduced me to sort of cinema in a way. Things like French cinema, Korean, Italian. It was interesting. It was just wow. It was when I was at art school. It just opened my eyes, and it was just one of those things where I saw the possibilities in film. I mean, again, it's like seeing how people sort of eat for breakfast in Japan or France or Germany or United States or Argentina. It was interesting on film, and I just went every day. Saw 2 movies a day for about 5 years of my life.
And that changed your practice very quickly?
Oh, it changed my world, because the perspective was so huge. Because film allows you to not just talk about the obvious. It lets you talk about the intimate. It's so beautiful, Yeah.
Hi. I noticed that you have a terrific professional relationship with Michael Fassbender. It seems that your movies bring out the best in his performances. And it looks like it just sort of developed organically. Are there any other actors that you can see sort of almost having almost like you have like a set of players for your films. A lot of directors have done that in the past, and for you with Michael Fassbender, it seems to work beautifully. Is there anybody else you're interested in having a repeat relationship with, where we could sort of look forward to seeing them in more of your films?
Again, you're correct to say these things happen organically. It's like falling in love. You don't choose it; just happens. Like wow, boom. It's like oh, okay. So with Michael, it was like that. And again, I would say, only time I ever had that again, it's unpredictable. I mean, there's people like Chiwetel Ejiofor, there's Paul Dano, there's Lupita Nyong'o, who's amazing. These always great actors. Paul Giamatti. I mean, there's always amazing actors that who knows. Again, a relationship could actually develop. I mean, with Lupita, for example, that was the first time she was on you haven't seen this actress. She's actually amazing. She plays a character called Patsy, who's incredible. Basically, A Star Is Born. We auditioned over 1,000 women for this role, and I was at a time where I didn't think I would get this actress. I would get the right person for this part, and she just came and blew me away. And she's A Star Is Born. She's going to be a huge talent. So possibly, I don't know. Who knows?
If Fassbender was love at first sight, do you remember that first moment when you set eyes on him? Do you remember your first, professionally, do you remember your first meeting with him or connection? How did you guys find each other?
With most love stories, you often hate the people you fall in love with at first. Like, what if, he came into audition, who's this guy? It was one of those things where, it didn't connect at first. There wasn't not a connection. It was just that I was naive to the fact as a sort of new director that when people walk into an audition room, how much they give of themselves, especially if they've been a person who's been hurt a lot by auditions, or how much do you give? Do you give everything? Often how do you know what to do, what to say? You want to say the right thing, and at the same time you want to be yourself. So when I first met Michael in the audition, I didn't really, I thought he was a bit cocky. And then obviously he came back. I had a great casting. A great casting director, whose name I'm trying to remember. I will remember by the end of the sentence. I will remember at the end of the sentence, hopefully. Who said, "Look, let him come back." I said, "Okay, let him come back," because other people wanted to see. And next time he came back, he was amazing, and that was it.
So I was curious about when you were researching the film. What other movies about slavery? What did you observe in them that you wanted to do differently with your film?
I didn't. The manuscript was enough. I did a lot of research on slavery, on the ins and outs and how it worked, and the industry and so forth. But in films, I wasn't interested in really. I just wanted to sort of research it firsthand. It's almost like, again, I wanted to be blindfolded and thrown into an apartment building, and having to navigate myself around that apartment building by my touch, my other senses, Therefore, I could make it something of my own. I could feel it. I could find it. I could look at things in a way that were there. Oh, sugar! I want to look at things which were there, and that I didn't have some kind of predisposed idea to put on it. I wanted to feel it and touch it at the same moment, and then make a judgment on it on that level, rather than a prejudgment. That was very important for me. So no, it was more, the actual thing. And also, when I read the book, images that came out of my head from turning the pages of the book. Each page, image, oh yeah. But then when you go there to the actual location, it changes again. So yeah.
Hi. I was wondering if through creating the Shame and through creating 12 Years a Slave, you said one of the reasons you did this was because you wanted to explore that area of embarrassment and shame you felt. Do you feel like you conquered a piece of that at all through making these?
My embarrassment and my shame is everyone's, I think, coming to that subject matter. I mean, I'm going back to when I was a kid. I remember when I was a kid and having maybe my first understanding of what that is. So that's what that came from, Again, it's like the Holocaust in a way. It is. Having to sort of grapple with that, embrace that, conquer that, make it yours. That's what one has to do with these kind of atrocities. Hold it up and don't be ashamed. Be very Well, the word is definitely not proud, of course, but it's part of you, as it is a part of everyone in this room. So there was the second half of that question I totally forgot.
Do you feel like you conquered it?
Ongoing.
Do you feel any sense of? I'm curious to know what kind of sense of responsibility or a burden you feel as you're tackling a subject such as this that has been ignored, but it is so loaded. Or do you have to kind of put that out of your mind and just kind of push forward? And how do you push that out of your mind?
I don't care. I really don't care, and I just don't give a fuck. If you do, then you disable yourself. Something in your body that won't work correctly. I just don't. I mean, what my main focus, one of my main focuses was trying to obviously to get this book into the national curriculum. 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup is a book. It's a classic. Everyone should. It's like everyone here has read Anne Frank, I imagine, or 99.8% of the people here have read Anne Frank's diary. It's the same with Solomon Northup's 12 Years a Slave. That's what I wanted. That is if you want to talk about the whole idea of trying to get somewhere, that would be something I would want to be involved in and hope the film can actually do that. People go out and buy it and put it in international curriculum, because there is no book, as far as I'm aware, of an international curriculum which is a first-hand account of slavery.
Hi. We are living in a culture that is completely and totally oversaturated by suffering, to the point where so many of us are, as a people, unable to empathize or feel compassionate when we turn on the news and when we see people dying in the streets. I mean, we don't have a government right now, and yet you and a host of other filmmakers and artists are consistently and brutally and gracefully able to create stories that make us feel and that make us care and that make us feel that empathy that we're lacking in our everyday lives. Do you do it more for you? Do you do it for us? What drives you to do it?
I think television is another beast. I think how we get our news is another beast. And it sort of it numbs us often. It's the news, and the news, how it comes to us, is is the same as any other news. Same as commercials come to us. So we are numbed out by the mechanics of television. I think with cinema, thank God for cinema, long live cinema. That when one comes together in a group and watch a picture, you go there for a purpose. You go to sort of, in majority of the times you go to be entertained. I think that the power of cinema is still, I mean, what you're saying is the power, we're talking about is the power of cinema still, which is amazing. That it can allow us to be, examine and question and to have a discussion about a topic which, has been, brushed underneath the carpet, to be honest. So I think what you're talking about is the power of cinema and, long live cinema.
In more of like a director's perspective, like you were talking earlier about rehearsing with actors, like I personally feel like rehearsing with actors, especially for film, like it could probably I think affects an actor's performance, especially like with actors being natural and a little spontaneous with with each scene. Like how do you go about rehearsing with actors, especially for inspirational and like moving film like this?
Well, I think each actor is very different. I mean, some get it like this, others take a little longer. Others have to be left alone. It's the case. It's testing, it's prodding. It's finding out how things work. The musicians, and all you want to do is on the day that they jam at the same time. So again, certain times we did in Shame, for example, it was so good. I ended the rehearsals after 3 days. Okay, the plane's taking off the runway here. Let's just leave it and wait till we're on set. Here, took a little longer because people had to get the dialogue, had to get the dialect, had to get the sort of they were there for a while to get the heat, understand what the heat does to you. So again, the physicality, the verbal, had to it took a little bit longer just because of the obvious. The environment was so suppressing with this heat. And of course, the dialect, people had to learn. So yeah, it's different. It's always different for different people.
Thanks. Steve, you've had the opportunity to work with so many great actors. and I know you just said that they're all very different and everyone works very differently. Do you find that there's something that separates them from, I don't want to say not great actors, but what is that takes them to a different level of work?
I think they have to be artists. I think that's the difference. I mean, I don't want to work with movie stars, or I'm not interested. I want to work with actors. I'm not. I mean, like Michael Fassbender is an artist because, whatever it takes, he'll go there. He'll find out. He'll try. He'll experiment. There'll be despair. Then there'll be yes. He's a worker. He's not a complainer. He wants to do something more than what he wants to go further beyond his own reach. He wants to get that point where it's beyond your reach. And I think what he does in a way, and I think what happened to other actors in this piece is he elevates people's game. They see him as, okay, let's do it. It's like a jamming. As a musician, is the only way I can think about it. Because when you got a good, you go for it as well, and then you surprise him, he surprises you, she surprises you. It happens. And it becomes very infectious. And what we had on set was we had a real huge support of each other. So it wasn't a case of, oh, he's bad, so he goes over there, I'm the slave, so I go. No, everyone was together. Everyone was embracing each other after a scene. Everyone went to dinner with each other. Everyone went for a drink with each other. Everybody was with each other. And that was pretty amazing. Again, from the catering, makeup, hair, wardrobe, sound, camera department, grips, gaffers, electricians. It was our movie, It was our movie. It was, it was a we thing, It was fantastic. This, to make that environment for actors is just incredible because actors like thoroughbred racehorses in a way. They know what's up. They walk in a situation, they're skittish. They know if they're in a situation where it's not, safe as such, or they feel something going on. But when you have that environment where everyone is there supporting each other, wow. Then the actors they could go wherever they want. They could fall on their face, and it's someone helping them get up. It's amazing what the possibilities are when it's everyone is together, and that's very important for me. That it's the crew is together. It's us. It's wonderful.
It's interesting to hear you talk about this sense of camaraderie, and also in relation to the woman's question earlier, the power of cinema. I sense a tremendous amount of not only adventurousness in your spirit, but also optimism.
Oh God, yeah. Oh no, yeah. As I said, we're all going to die, but guess what? Before I die, we'll go for it. What else can we do? Complain? No.
Hi, over here. So I haven't seen the movie yet. I'm really looking forward to it. But I wanted to ask you if you could say a little bit more about the story you wanted to tell, because you said that you didn't want to look at a lot of other films, and you wanted to really focus on the story that you wanted to tell about this piece of American history. But in addition to that, I also wanted to know how you approached particularly the issue of violence, and how you wanted to think about violence and represent violence in its multiple dimensions in the film.
Well, it was a balance. It was a balancing act. I mean, how much you put in, how much you leave out. Because of course, to sort of sit in a movie and have these things, it's not pleasant. But it's not about that. I mean, obviously, when you see the movie, hopefully, see the movie, you'll see it's not about that. But one had to if you're making a film about slavery, you have to go there. Either you make a film about slavery or you don't. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where you have to have the balance, and I worked very hard on that. We worked very hard on getting that balance. So that's what I'll say really. I mean, if I was to film the actual book, take the book and film it as it was, I mean, it would be far too much. But to have that balance, because cinema is interesting in a way that you could show things in a way that aren't seen. So evidence of things which aren't seen. James Baldwin book. Evidence of things which aren't seen. I think it's the wrong pronunciation of the title of the book, but similar. So you could show that within cinema. You could see, you could have a whiff of it, a smell almost. Unfortunately, you can't do smell in cinema, but you can have an idea. It's how you. Forgive me. I'll be very quick with this one. It's how you construct it, in a way. How you make the yarn as such.
I thought it was fascinating how you had one scene where the Bible is used to justify slavery, and another scene where the slaves are talking about how the Bible suggests liberation. And there's a subtext here about the role that religion plays in this context, and I'd like you to elaborate a little bit about how you see religion in this context, how the slave master is using it to justify themselves, and the slaves are finding some sort of solace in it.
Yeah, I mean, again, for me, it was a sort of science fiction. For me, as an explanation, it is a book which is called like the Bible, and like people use it to say different things about this book. It's odd. For me, it was a very oddity. It wasn't. I had to look at it in that way, in that perspective. Again, it's going into blindfolding yourself and walking into the apartment. What is this bloody book? And this person's saying this about this book, this person's saying this thing about it in this book, there's people saying this thing about this book, and these other people are singing this song, I mean, about, with the sort of roll, John, and roll. So it's very odd. I find it, it's been extraordinary, what's the word I'm looking for? Goodness gracious. It's been, within tragedies like this, with slavery, Holocaust, whatever, it's been extraordinary, inspirational, and encouraging, and faith in that sense has been extraordinarily powerful. And other times it's been, as we are living in now, pretty much hell. So you take from what you want from it and leave what you don't, sort of thing.
I just want to know, if you had any advice for young filmmakers on trying to get their start within the higher up industry and past college and things like that.
Go for it. I mean, I just think, I was in NYU for 3 months. Wasn't my cup of tea, but it is other people's cup of tea, film school. And I don't know if you need to go to film school now, I don't know, but you obviously need the contacts. How do you get in to the industry? I don't know. But all I know is that, it's just a sort of, to experiment. You're young, man. You should just be experimenting. You should be holding that camera, throwing it up in the air, catching it, looking at this, writing a screenplay. I mean, just go for it. Just experiment. Narrative. Read a lot. Read. There's a lot of books. Read. Narrative. And just go for it. Experiment. I mean, again, how you want to make films, how next generation of people want to make films will be what we see. And I think, do not sort of be, funneled into one stream, but have a huge breadth. Get to see foreign movies, everything. Just again, it's open your eyes. Go to art galleries. Those are the kind of things I would advise a young filmmaker.
12 Years a Slave opens in limited release October 18th. Steve, thank you for your generosity today and spending time with us.
Thank you guys for coming. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Please welcome this evening's guest moderator from the Film Society of Lincoln Center, Eugene Hernandez, and tonight's guest, Steve McQueen.
Thank you for being here. Welcome, Steve McQueen. The film 12 Years a Slave is playing at the New York Film Festival tomorrow night and again on Sunday. I've had the privilege of seeing the film a few weeks ago at the Telluride Film Festival, and then again this morning at the New York Film Festival at a press screening. And Steve, you said in Telluride that before you found the book 12 Years a Slave, and we'll talk more about the book and the story in a moment, but you said that before you found the book, you had decided that you wanted to make a movie or write a screenplay, make a movie about American slavery. When did that light bulb go off in your head? When did you make that sort of decision, and why did you make that decision? Why did you want to tell that story?
Well, it's more about slavery, really, in general. It happened to become an American story through the book I found. And the reason why I wanted to sort of make a movie about slavery was just because it was someone asked me a question recently. It was a strange question. It was a question that I've never been asked before. When was it the first time you heard about slavery? I can't remember as a child. I couldn't remember, but all I remember was a huge sense of shame, a huge sense of, embarrassment, really. And I wanted to sort of overcome that. I wanted to conquer it. I wanted to tame it. I wanted to master it. I wanted to understand it. And it was one of these things where, in the history of cinema, there was a massive hole regarding this huge world, not just American, subject. huge, and I wanted to investigate it, and that was my want.
Have you ever wondered why, or have you ever been able to figure out why there's been such a hole? I mean, certainly the topic has been explored even recently in Tarantino's film last year, but you're absolutely right when you explain that it certainly hasn't been explored in any in-depth way for years.
I think in America people were pretty embarrassed by the whole thing. I wanted to avoid it. I think it was okay looking at sort of Germans or Nazis in Germany, as far as Holocaust is concerned, because it was something which was removed. And in one's own backyard, I think it's difficult and understandable, really, difficult to deal with and to contemplate and to comprehend. But now I think people are actually open to wanting to deal with this subject matter. I mean, with the unfortunate events of Trayvon Martin, with having a black president, the 150th anniversary of the abolition of slavery, 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, the voting rights being taken back as such. I mean, it's a perfect storm right now, and I think people are asking themselves who are they and what are they within the context of now, and how did they come to this as such. Looking backwards, you need to look, in order to go forwards, one has to look backwards. I think people are very much sort of want to engage in this particular subject right now. I'm very pleased, of course.
Can you elaborate for me as I try to? I want to get to a little bit more about your own personal reason for wanting to explore this, and I'm curious to know, in your background, your upbringing, your schooling, how the subject was treated, whether that's American slavery or slavery in general, how it was explored for you in your upbringing. And you mentioned feeling this sense of...
It wasn't at all.
It wasn't at all?
No, it wasn't at all. I mean, there was a very brief history lesson, if anything, a day, that was it, we're off. Let's do the Second World War, It was more like that for me in Europe. And again, I think the psychological impact of slavery, I mean, we see it, walk out the street, you see it. I mean, the mental health, unemployment, prisons. I mean, it's quite evident. One doesn't have to travel far to sort of see the evidence of slavery. And it's one of those things which obviously needs to be talked about and examined. I mean, it's quite obvious, unfortunately.
You live in Amsterdam, and you said something to the effect of when you found this book, and I wanted to have you explain how and when you found this book in a moment. But when you found this book, you couldn't help but reflect on the Diary of Anne Frank. Tell me about your wife finding this book and handing it to you and that experience.
Well, I had the idea. I needed an in onto the subject matter of slavery. And
to be more specific, the film is the story of a man, a northern man, who is kidnapped into slavery. And it's a harrowing... the concept is not only harrowing, but what we witness in this film that he endures is beyond terrifying. Tell me about... as you read that book then and learned about his story, tell me about some of the early steps you took and the early decisions you made as to how you would adapt it. I haven't read it, so I'm wondering about the different directions you could have gone.
The main thing, I just want to obliterate a little bit of your question through this one word. It's called love. It's a very odd, interesting, wonderful, challenging, confrontational, upsetting word, because that's the thing what I discovered through reading the book, in a way, that this person had survived through his love for his family and a certain kind of, how can I say, strength, as it were. And I can't think of, again, with the book, it was a process. It was a process of, reading, again, I think 80% of the dialogue comes from the book, because it's so good. It is what it is. I mean, you play with it with informed structure, and of course add scenes and so forth. But it was the 80% of the dialogue of this picture is from the book, because it was so good. It's about structure for me. In was that I had this idea of a free man who gets kidnapped into slavery, And I was working with John Ridley on the script, and it was a bit stagnant. And I was talking to my wife, and she said to me, "Well, why don't you look into the real accounts of slavery?" Obviously. And then we both did some research, and then she found this book, 12 Years a Slave. And she said, "I think I got it." And if anything, that was obviously a huge understatement, because when I had it in my hand and I was reading the book and turning every page became this kind of revelation.
How long ago was that? How long ago was it that she found it?
2011, possibly. I always acquainted with my son, so yeah. Yeah, how old's Dexter? He's 4, so yeah, okay, 2009. Sorry. Sorry. That's good. So we found the book, and I was very upset with myself, really. Very upset with myself. So how come I didn't know about this book? How did I not know this book? And then I realized no one I knew about this book. And what was interesting about it was 97 years before, Anne Frank's diary, there was this guy called Solomon Northup who wrote this book about slavery, a first-hand account, obviously. And it was just upset with myself. But then, that was it. I had the idea came into 3 dimensions in my hand, and that was the script. There it was. And I thought, okay, let's go for it.
As you see in the trailer, and as we've alluded to, but just